Welcome to the REDCap Data Dictionary class. My name is Bas de Veer, and you should have taken at least the intro class or have done the video tutorial online. What we're going to do today is look at the data dictionary, but before we're going to do that, we're going to deal a little bit with branching logic, and after that with importing and exporting. These three are usually very closely interwoven, so that's why I put them in one class. I'm going to do that by first going over some basic assumptions and some basic math. Nothing too strenuous that you didn't get in third grade. So, but we do need to cover it because it's being used in REDCap. Then we're going to focus on branching logic, basic syntax, how you can make a query, that kind of stuff. After that, some data dictionary syntax and structure, some practical issues with the data dictionary, and finally importing and exporting. If you have any questions during this presentation, please feel free to ask them. Some basic assumptions. So you should have access to REDCap, which I know you do. You should be familiar with the online designer, some basic REDCap concepts like what is an online designer, what's a form, what's a variable, and what's a record. And the basic operations of Excel. That's useful for the data dictionary itself. If you don't like Excel, you can use another program, but you should know how to use a spreadsheet program. This class was basically designed for non-programmers, meaning that it might be a little bit simplistic for people that have some programming experience, but it does give you a good intro in how to program some basic branching logic in REDCap. You should know your basic logic operators, what's an AND and what's an OR. Most people do, however it's an assumption, and you should know your basic math syntax. So why use the data dictionary and or complex branching logic? Well, most people use it for bigger studies, specifically longitudinal studies and multiple surveys. The data dictionary will allow you to quickly craft a number of variables. Me personally, in an online designer setting, I would average about 20, maybe 30 variables an hour. With the data dictionary, I can easily reach 100. So it speeds up the process. However, it's a little less forgiving in terms of hand-holding. So data dictionary is a little bit harder to learn. You should also use it if you have some complex protocols with a lot of dependencies and complex logic. For instance, if you have a very complex eligibility scheme to figure out how to screen people in or out. Or I did a survey for basically a billing project where they had 32 pages of flowcharts that need to be in a single survey, which was a challenge to put in REDCap with branching logic, but we made it work with the data dictionary. If you want to streamline your forms, the data dictionary is really handy with that. You can copy, paste, you can merge forms or separate them. You can daisy chain surveys together, quickly copy them as I said, and it's just really good for tailoring your projects on the fly too. You don't impact REDCap while you're working on your data dictionary. Only when you upload it, it becomes relevant. So an example why you should use branching logic in our data dictionaries. So this was one of the first projects I did. Was an eligibility evaluation for a hot flash study. So only women were screened for this, obviously. They had to be between a certain age, between 40 and 62, menopausal, had hot flashes, more than 3 a day. They were disrupting their daily life. They were not a drug user and not a corn allergy. The last two had to do with the medication they would receive. So an example of the branching logic would be this little string of text over here, which is basically this translating, the top translated in branching logic. Trust me, at the end of the day or this lecture, you should be able to craft this yourself relatively easily. So let's begin with the branching logic. It follows an if-then-else structure with specifically like if a certain statement, and the statement is something you can configure, then if that statement is true, then show the field. If it's not true, hide the field. That's the only thing you can do. You cannot change show or hide field at all. So It is impossible to influence other fields through branching logic, meaning that you would have to craft branching logic for those fields specifically, otherwise you cannot do that. So you could say, like, if this field is hidden, for instance, make this value in this other variable 3. That's not true. That's not possible, unfortunately. There's 3 ways of editing branching logic. The standard online designer, drag and drop, and the online designer advanced syntax are good ways to learning how to do branching logic, specifically learning the syntax, and of course through the data dictionary. Underneath here there is a link to the help page for branching logic where you can find the syntax if you forget how to do that. Okay, some logic operators. The AND, OR, and NOT operators are the only ones allowed within REDCap. If you're a programmer, you probably are also familiar with more exotic ones like XORs and NOXes and that kind of stuff. Those are not in there. You can of course make them from the AND, OR, and NOTs if you combine them, but they're not in there by definition. The REDCap operators are just very simple AND and OR, lowercase, and for the NOT operator it's these 2 little arrows, the left arrow and the right arrow together without any space in between. Then the math operators you can use in REDCap. There are a couple of symbols, the standard plus, minus, divide, multiply, equals, and comparing. Should be familiar for everybody who had 3rd grade math. So REDCap uses the standard symbols for that you have, for instance, in Excel too. The brackets, the normal brackets define a field. If you put the variable name between 2 brackets, that tells REDCap, okay, look at this specific variable. The parentheses define the logical order just as they would do in any math solution. Finally, as 2 single quotes define a value for 1 or the value green. You can technically use double quotes. However, because most people use Excel to edit the data dictionary and Excel doesn't like double quotes, that sometimes messes up the data dictionary and can cause the upload to fail. So single quotes work every single time, so I highly advise people to do that. Some examples. The basic example is this person retired, yes or no? We want to make that visible if the age is above 65. Of course I know that some people retire before 65, but this is an example. You would need the field age and the field retired. The field retired is the one you're going to hide or show, and the field age is where you're going to look at for a certain value. The branching logic in the field retired would be age between brackets, because that's the variable name, is bigger than 65. So as long as the person is 66 or older, this logic will become true. This will show the field, are you retired, yes or no? If you're under 65, it will be hidden. Fairly simple, right? Cool. Example number 2. Do you have hot flashes? Make that visible based on a range in a field. For instance, you only want to have the first example about the eligibility. You only want to ask this question of certain people within a certain age range. So you need, again, the 2 elements, age and the field hot flash, which you're going to hide or show. And the branching logic is actually a combined statement of 2 separate statements. Age is bigger or equal to 40, and age is at the same time smaller or equal to 69. Basically, you're defining a range between 40 and 69 through this statement. So REDCap will check this. So if somebody's age is between those 2, this becomes true and this field shows up. Example 3, an OR. So an OR is different than an AND. Instead of both statements need to be true, just one of the statements or both of them need to be true for this entire statement to become true. In this case, display a warning regarding ineligibility based upon the answers of 2 fields, smoker and drugs. Like, are you a smoker and did you use drugs? It hides or shows the field like this person is ineligible based on if either of these is true. So the branching logic for this is smoker is 1 or drugs is 1. This was a simple yes-no question for both of them. So yes was coded as 1 and no was coded as 0. So as long as those fields are empty or 0, this won't show up. In this case specifically, as long as one of these 2 is true, this shows up. If both of them are true, then it also shows up. So the only way this field would be hidden if there are both no's. Radio versus checkboxes. So there's a syntax difference between the two. If you have a normal radio button, you can say, okay, this specific value. The reason why this is happening is because REDCap stores radio buttons as a single value, because you can only have a single answer in any radio button. So in this case, the variable is 1, or variable is option 23. For checkboxes, this is a little bit different because you can select multiple options in a checkbox. So you would need to have some way of defining whether that option in that checkbox is true, or checked or unchecked. So how REDCap does this, it actually takes the variable name, behind the variable name puts 2 parentheses with the raw value for that specific option. For instance, if you have option 1, it will be a variable between option 1 is 1 or is 0. 1 is checked, 0 is unchecked. So in this case, if you have this statement, the variable for this checkbox is either option 1 or option 23 is checked. So if it's 0, it means unchecked. Example number 4, checkbox, similar to what we just saw, but this as an actual example. So again, want to hide or show the ineligibility field based on the countries that a person visited. In this case, I had 10 countries ranging from Germany to South Africa. So in this case, there were 3 countries that had a travel advisory, and they wanted to screen out the people that were that went to those countries in the last 6 months. So what they did is, well, the countries' raw codes were 3, 5, and 9. So if either of those options were checked, 1, 2, 3, or just a single, this would be display the ineligibility question. If none of them were checked, then the eligibility question wouldn't show up. Example 5, make a warning appear when the field age is empty. This is a trick I use a lot to give people an extra prompt that you really need to fill out this field. So in this case, again, you just need the field age, and you need a descriptive field with the wording like you need to fill in your age. You can just put in branching logic saying age is 2 single quotes or 2 double quotes, depending on your preference, without any space in between. If there's a space in between, REDCap will actually look for a single space in that field. If there's no space, it will look for an empty field. So this is really useful to give those extra visual cues, or display some extra information, or even hide and show different variables. So the opposite of that is when a field is not empty. For instance, let's say you have an entire list of questions in your questionnaire, but you only want people to go through them one by one. So you only want to show the next question when the previous question has been filled out. Well, not is then really handy combined with the empty statement. So you, for instance, only want to make the field gender appear when age is not empty. In this case, you need the field age, you need the field gender, and you put the branching logic age is not empty. Again, the 2 single quotes here for branching logic. So what this does is, as long as somebody fills out something in the field age, the field gender will show up. It doesn't matter what, as long as it's valid for that field. So I've used this a lot. One of the fun little things you can do with this is what I call cascading lists. Let's say you have medication lists. Some people have 2 medications, some people have 10. There's really no way of knowing beforehand how many medications they're going to fill out. However, you don't want to have the 10 spots for medication show up, because it kind of clutters your survey or form. So what you can do is just have each sequential medication spot look back to the previous one and see if it's empty, yes or no. So basically what this does is you will always have the number of medications somebody fills out plus 1. So really handy trick. Some complex logic. So in this case, we kind of want to only make the field hot flash appear when age is not between the ages of 40 and 62, and age is not empty. So basically that's a statement. So we have the field age, field hot flash, and two different branching logic statements, a green and a red one. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to decide which of these two is valid. Okay, so you go with green. This is actually a trick question because I like to be mean, because both of them are true. And both of them are valid. The only difference is that the red one is a little bit shorter because I removed one duplicate of age. Basically what I used is these are two statements, two separate statements conjoined by an or. So either one is true, then the entire statement becomes true, where the age is not zero. Here I pulled the in the second one I pulled the age out of either one of these statements, made them two individual statements, and basically said like, okay, so either one of these is true and age is not empty. So they will both work. So it's just an illustration of how you can make different branching logic which still works. It's just a little logic thing. As a programmer, you might be interested in also knowing that you can use some limited Java functionality in branching logic, as long as the final result is a true or false. So I use that a couple of times, like if a sum of, for instance, a bunch of variables is smaller than 17, hide or show this field. So that's a way you can do that. The FAQ actually has a list of all the functions you can use. But in my opinion, or my experience, most people actually use the date difference function a lot. So, yeah, or the rounding up or rounding down function. Data dictionary. The data dictionary itself is very important. It defines the entire project. It defines the forms and it defines the variables within REDCap. If you delete a field from a data dictionary and upload it, all the values that were basically gathered for that specific field in the existing records in REDCap project will result in a null value. They'll be effectively erased from REDCap. So that's one of the biggest risks for any data dictionary user. I had one lady who had 300 variables and tried to add 2, only uploaded 2 and deleted 300 variables. Which would be a bad thing. So because of that experience, I always advise people, like, before you mess with a data dictionary, back up your entire project by downloading the current data dictionary and doing a full data export. That way you can always restore it later on. It's always good to have multiple versions of the same data dictionary. Usually they're only a couple of kilobytes, so it doesn't take too much space on your computer. And you can go back to see what you did in the past. But that's just good practice. Also, if you're not sure on how to use the data dictionary and what it does, create an empty test project for yourself just to mess with it. Or if you have an existing project that you want to work on the data dictionary without impacting the project itself, just copy the entire project and actually work in the copy instead of the main one. Okay, some other definitions here. The data dictionary does not define events, surveys, project settings, user rights, scheduling, randomization, and data quality rules. So if you are using that full data dump and the data dictionary dump to, for instance, transfer your entire project to a different REDCap installation, let's say you switch universities and you need to take your research with you, make sure to copy this manually or in a document so you know who or what the settings were when you were running it here. Most of these are fairly self-explanatory, however they're not covered with the data dictionary and as a result won't upload automatically in REDCap. How to get your data dictionary? Well, when you have your project open in the project setup page, there's a box with design your data collection instruments. It should have the online designer or upload data dictionary. The download the current data dictionary is highlighted here. If you click on that, it will automatically download an Excel file or CSV file to your computer that you can start editing with. I personally use Excel, but some people use LibreOffice or Numbers or whatever spreadsheet they would like. If you go to the Upload Data Dictionary page, the same link is there if you would rather download it from there. Data Dictionary syntax. So the overall structure of any data dictionary is that the columns in the spreadsheet are the aspects of variables. For instance, what's the name of it, which form does it live in, etc. And the rows each row is an individual list of variables. The exception of that is the first row, which is the header row, where you see, okay, this is the form column or this is the field type column. So row 1 is always reserved for those headers, but all the other rows are treated as variables. So there are 4 different types of aspects. You have the mandatory ones that you always need to fill out for every single variable, otherwise REDCap will not even allow you to upload the data dictionary. The conditional mandatory ones, usually these are based on field type. For instance, if you have a calculated field, you kind of want to put in a calculation. Similar thing to if you have any structured field types like checkboxes or dropdowns, you kind of want to define options. Then you have a couple non-mandatory fields, mainly to either dress up the specific variable, give it branching logic, make a field type validation in there, etc. And finally, matrix fields. So you can copy or basically link different variables together to display as a matrix. I have an example data dictionary here, which I will also email to you guys. The green ones are the mandatory ones, the blue ones is the non-mandatory ones, and the red one is the conditional mandatory one. And finally, the matrix group is also orange, because if you're making a matrix, that's also required. Mandatory fields, 4 major ones. The first one you're always going to have to define is the variable or the field name. So variables have to be unique, so you can't have, for instance, medication 1 twice. However, you can have medication 1A and medication 1B, so that's allowed. The first variable in any project has to be the study ID, which is always a text box. The study ID, you can rename the study ID to be a participant ID or an MRN or whatever you want to call it. However, it does have to be a text box, because if it's a drop-down, then you only have room for as many records as options in the drop-down, which would be a bad thing. So, so that's one requirement. REDCap will enforce that with a vengeance, because it uses that study or participant ID to actually store all the data, because that's its little hook. Variable names also cannot start with a number, so it has to start with a letter. All variable names have to be lowercase, a number or an underscore, no special other characters allowed. So I always advise keeping your variable names short and decipherable. For instance, if you're doing a medication for a follow-up or a baseline visit, make it RX BS1, so or BL, whatever you want to do. For medication 2, RX BS2, so you can quickly see, okay, this is medication for the baseline. Secondly, form names. Form names have to be linked to every single variable, and they have to be sequential. So you cannot have the first 5 variables be form demographics, then 5 variables for measurements, and then another 5 variables for the form demographics. So all the variables in a single form have to be sequential in one block of data. Form names can be pretty much anything. REDCap automatically makes it lowercase for some reason, but you can always change the form name in the online designer manually if you want to do that. Then the field type. Field types are limited by choice, because we only have so many field types. The FAQ page has a pretty good table about what are the different field types and what's the shorthand code for each one of them. A text field is very simple, it's text, similar with a note field, notes. Descriptive field is descriptive, radio buttons is radio, checkboxes, checkbox. So it kind of makes sense. If If you do 50 variables, I guarantee you know the field types by heart. So that's a thing. And finally, a field label. Field label is different from the variable name. It's actually the question or the statement that gets displayed to the user, whereas the variable name only gets displayed on the backend during an export. Field label can be anything from free text, uppercase, lowercase, special characters. You can even put HTML text in there to basically dress it up. You could put pictures in there, whatever you want. So, however, it does have to have at least one character in it. Conditional mandatory fields. So mostly choices or calculations. Choices are for the drop-down, checkboxes, radio buttons, and a slider. The slider is in there because you need to have labels for a slider. So the left and the right hand. The middle one's optional. And of course calculated fields. So calculated fields need any calculation. The matrix fields are conditionally mandatory because if you want to make a matrix, you need to have that field filled out. So you have to give it a matrix name. More about that later. So the syntax for conditional mandatory fields is as follows. If you have any choice, it's always raw value, comma, label, pipe, and then that basically ends the first option, and then value, comma, label, pipe, etc., etc., etc. Repeat that ad infinitum, of course. One very important bit is you can make the value whatever you want. It can be 43 green if you want that. However, once REDCap sees the comma, it's going to assume that that's a separation between the raw value and the label. So again, in the label you can pretty much put anything, even HTML tags, so you can make, for instance, some options colored green or red or bigger or smaller. So that's how the syntax for choices works. This is true for radio buttons, checkboxes, and drop-downs, and yes/nos. So the calculations can have any type of JavaScript functionality, for instance the date diff, like I mentioned earlier. The variables are following the branching logic syntax fairly closely, or the entire syntax, so variables as in between the two brackets, variable 1. So that's kind of important. There was one issue with the datediff function that they fixed in a future upgrade, but right now, for some reason, if you put the today operator in there, if you want to compare a date to today, then it doesn't work in certain circumstances. If you're going to use that, shoot me an email and I can tell you more about that. So yeah, calculations mess with it. It always does have to be a number that comes out of that. So you cannot have a calculation be approved or disapproved. It always has to be a number. So it can be a decimal number, but it has to be a number. So yeah, please be careful with that. What I usually use is have the calculation be done and then have a descriptive field off of that with the text I want to display based on the calculation that comes out of it. Slider labels. So the syntax is very simple. It doesn't have a raw value. It's just label, pipe, label, pipe, label. This is a 3-label variety. You also have a 2-label variety, which is the minimum. So that's just 2 of these, label, pipe, label. That's it. For instance, disagree, agree, or disagree, neutral, agree. So the left one is always the left-hand side label, the middle one is the middle, and the right hand is the right hand. That looks like this. For instance, here's a drop-down, which is a good example of male, female. Female is coded as 0, male is coded as 1. So that's kind of handy. Same with yes, no, for instance. This is a good example of a calculation over here. I don't know if it's readable for everybody. Otherwise I can blow it up. So this is very simple. It basically takes the date of birth of the person, compares it to today's date, and then yields a certain number in years. So to calculate somebody's age. However, the kicker for this one is that it rounds it up to the lowest number. So if somebody is 19 and a half, it will round it down to 19. So that's how that works. The syntax for all of these special operations and functions can be found in the FAQ. This one is a good one for BMI. Weight times 10,000 divided by the height exponentially quadrated, and then rounded that up and you get a BMI for a patient based on height and weight, which are up here. What's kind of important to know about calculations is it's always good to have calculations at the bottom or below the order of the variables you're referencing. For instance, if you calculate the BMI on top of the screen and height and weight are only captured at the bottom, that gets confusing for people. So that might be a good tip to not do that. Most people don't do that automatically, but some people try. Matrix fields. Again, matrix fields group needs to be the same. So if you have a matrix of 5 questions in the category food, you name, for instance, the matrix food. And they have to be sequential. So similar to form name, they have to be sequential underneath each other. Only a radio button or checkbox is allowed in any matrix fields, obviously, and the choices must match. Non-mandatory fields, and there are quite a bit of them. The section header is a non-mandatory field. The only thing that a section header does is it creates a little yellow box between 2 variables, specifically the variable above which it's placed in the data dictionary. So it's just a way of formatting your form a little bit. However, it also gives you an option in the surveys. If you want to separate a very long survey, let's say you have a 100 variable survey, might be a little bit too much for one screen. You want to divide it up in 10 equal sections. You can use the section headers to tell REDCap where to do that. So that's really useful for that. It will then create 10 pages. Section headers can be found in column C, can be any type of information in there. Put HTML tags in there if you want. I like to use the center tag so you can actually center it in the middle of the screen. Then the field notes is also HTML capable to a certain degree. Not all of them work that well. Field note is usually used if you have, for instance, a validation for datetime and you want people to know what the format is. So that's kind of handy. Just type that in. Then we have text validation types. So this is only reserved for text and a little bit for slider. If you put in number in the text validation type in a slider variable, it will actually display the number between 0 and 100 next to the slider on the screen. So that's a way you can turn that on. If you don't want that and you just want to just leave it blank for slider. The text validation types, of course, there's a little bit more of them. Again, the syntax for that is found in the FAQ. Datetime validations are usually date underscore and then the format. For instance, month, day, year, it's MDY, so date underscore MDY. So you can put that in there. Then next to that you have the minimum and the maximum. Minimum and maximum is optional, so you can put in just a minimum or just a maximum, both or none at all. I really like it, for instance, if you ask somebody their age, to have a minimum and a maximum between 0 and 120, because you don't have negative age, and there are not a whole lot of people who are older than 120. So that's my preference. However, you can also use the minimum and the maximum for date validation, saying that you cannot enter a certain date before this minimum or after this maximum. Then we have the identifier. Basically tells REDCap, okay, this is personal health information, this specific variable. Branching logic, which we covered in the beginning. So all the branching logic will be put in here for a specific variable. The required field basically tells REDCap, okay, this is a field that you need to turn on or off. Or not, you turn it on and off, and basically it tells REDCap this field needs to be filled out in a survey or in a form, and it will give people a pop-up and won't let them continue until you filled that out properly. So you cannot leave it blank. Custom alignment, there are 4 options in there: left vertical, left horizontal, right vertical, and right horizontal. Shorthand for that is all capital LV, LH, RV, RH. Basically it allows you to mess a little bit with where the text box is placed, or the way the options are displayed in radio buttons and text boxes. For instance, if you have a couple of short options, say yes, no, maybe, by default REDCap places them underneath each other, so yes, no, maybe sequentially. However, that takes up a lot of real estate on the space, so you might want to order them yes, no, maybe next to each other, which only takes up a single row. It's kind of handy to mess with the custom alignment. It's just a way to tweak your project a little bit more. And then finally, question. This is only relevant for surveys. If a particular form is a survey and it has a lot of branching logic, the auto numbering doesn't work that well, specifically because it just keeps on numbering based on variables. So you could jump from question 6 to question 12 to question 18, all in the same sequence, because of branching logic hides some of the questions in between. So this will actually allow you to put in your own question numbering yourself. So you would put in question 1 to 6, and if then what's supposed to be 7 through 10 is hidden, you can call those 6A, 6B, and 6C, and then go on with 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's a useful trick if you are doing surveys. So the syntax for these non-mandatory fields, section header and field notes have free text or HTML. The text field types are based on, are limited, CDFAQ, so there's only a certain amount of field types, and the minimum and maximum validation has to match the field types. For instance, if you put 0 and 120 as a minimum and maximum for a date field validation, that doesn't make any sense. So it has to be a date at that point. The identifiers and the required fields have a yes-no type syntax. Basically, if you want to make something an identifier or required, you put a little y in there. If not, you leave it blank. That easy. And branching logic has specific syntax. So how that looks, for instance, this is a good example of a section header with demographics, characteristics, or contact information. If you want to center this, center, you center it. At least I do that a lot, so that's why. The field notes is a good one here. For instance, this is the year, month, day variety, so it has the text validation date. For the phone validation, it has include the area code. Some people don't do that. For a number, for instance, height in centimeters, the number is, the minimum is 130, the maximum is 215. Same for weight in kilograms, 35 and 200. Or in this case, how many times has the subject given birth is an integer. You cannot have given birth in negative times, so it's always 0, but the maximum is undefined. So that's a way of using that. This is a little bit more specific. For instance, for lab values over here, you see the lab values here, and they have specific ranges, so you can put the ranges in there as numbers. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is a good example of identifiers, just a Y, these are identifiers. If not, then they're blank. Same with required. Branching logic shows up like this, just put it in there like that. Custom alignment would, for instance, be LV, LH, RH, or RV. RH is the default, by the way. Question numbering looks like this, for instance, 1, 2, 3, 3A, 3A, 3B, 3C, 4, etc. So some practical issues. There is a hidden Easter egg field in there called a dynamic SQL field. It's coded as SQL in the field type column. and this one is only modifiable by REDCap admin because it actually allows you to pull some data from different projects and populate it in a drop-down field. Because of that, REDCap doesn't allow you to change anything about it. So if you move its position, if you edit its field label, or if you edit any of the other aspects and try to upload that data dictionary, REDCap says, you're not an admin, you're not allowed to do this. So that's annoying for most people. However, if that's the case, just shoot your data dictionary to me or one of my fellow REDCap admins, and we'll upload it for you within 1 business day. It's a quick fix for us. Just make sure that you, besides the data dictionary that you're shooting to us, also define which project you want this uploaded in, because not everybody does that all the time. HTML compatible fields. Used for formatting text, some compatible fields: section header, field label, choices and or slider labels, and the field note. If you don't know how to use HTML, we have a link to a nifty online editor where you can just put in your text, format it, and then hit the source button, and it will actually give you the code that you need to copy and paste into REDCap. Super handy if you don't know HTML. However, if you don't want to use that one, if you Google HTML editor online, then you can probably find one that suits your needs. Importing and exporting. So importing and exporting is possible for, of course, the data dictionary. You can import and export the data dictionary. Codebooks, you can only export a codebook. Codebook is nothing more than more of a human readable data dictionary. If you look at it online in demographics, over in my demo project under project home, the first option is codebook. A codebook is just a long list basically of all your variables within REDCap with field notes, branching logic, options, etc. I've noticed that a lot of people like this better than the data dictionary like this, because it's a little bit less abstract, a little bit more structured, and more human readable. So if you, for instance, have a PI that wants to see what all the variables are, shoot in the codebook instead of the data dictionary. Data, of course, you can import data via CSV file, or you can export data in a whole slew of different formats. However, most people use CSV. All the instruments and forms, you can also either export them via PDF, you can export allocation tables for randomization and import them. Various logs can be exported if you want to bug the IRB. Say, here's my 3,000 page log file for this project I've been running for 6 years. Enjoy. So that's a possibility. However, for the import function, especially for the data dictionary and the data import, there's some strict format restrictions, mainly because REDCap can only read so many things. REDCap will actually double check these restrictions up when you upload, and if it doesn't like it, it will tell you, and will tell you what's wrong, so you don't have to hunt through your entire document to see what's wrong. Okay, data. So data import tool, just talked about it. It will also give you a template that you can fill out yourself, or copy and paste data in and then upload it based on the current variables in the project you're currently in. The data exports, reports and stats has been totally overhauled 2 months ago, so it's totally different from one of my previous classes. I'll go step by step how to build a report on that one too. Data exports can be done in CSV, SPSS, Stata, R, or SAS. So any of those last 4 are usually a couple of files that you need to upload in specific order to your statistical program for it to work. It also has de-identification built in, so that's kind of nice. If you're exporting PDFs, you can do that through the export tool itself, or you can do it in a specific record. For instance, if you only want to export a specific record in a PDF form, then you can do that. So going to the data import tool, anywhere within REDCap, data import tool is over here. If you don't see that for some reason, chances are you don't have the rights to import data. Give yourself the rights and it will show up. So in the data import tool, there's a lot of text. Read through it at your leisure, but the important bit is the download your data import template. This will give you an Excel file, which looks like this, all blank except for the header information, but all the information here is based on your variable names. So if you want to put in gender, which is usually 1 or 2, so 1 or 0, and make that for study ID 1 and study ID 2, for instance, I now define that gender is 1 for study ID 1 and 0 for study ID 2. Of course, fill in all the other data, upload it, and it populates it for you. If you populate this, REDCap will tell you what it's going to do. Data importing can only add records or edit existing records. So you cannot delete any existing records within REDCap. So in this case, if I already have 10 records in REDCap, let's say record 1 through 10, REDCap will see this, oh, you only want to edit record 1 and 2. So it will leave 3 through 10 alone, basically. It won't do anything with it. REDCap will give you an overview of what it's going to do. For instance, if I do this, I'll go to the import functionality underneath here, choose the file, in this case from downloads. I open that and I click upload. Oh, it will actually give me an error because I did it wrong. Because I forgot the event name. There you go. So if you have events, you also need to define an event name. Let's see what the event names were. In this case, enrollment arm 3. Okay. So make that enrollment arm 3 for both of them. Save. And I go back to my import tool, choose file, open, upload it. Oh, still did it wrong. Ah, there you go. My bad. Thanks for catching that. So spelling matters. Upload it again, and now it says your document is successfully uploaded, ready for review, meaning that I haven't uploaded any data yet or committed it to the database. It'll actually say, okay, what are you going to do? In this case, there are 2 existing records, one for Obama, one for Putin. It will actually tell me what it's going to change. In this case, there's already gender defined for Obama. In this case, it all was the 0. It's now going to be 1. For number 2, it's going to be just added to it. So
but it's going to leave their names.
Yes, anything else will be actually overwritten because I've added those variables as blanks. In this case, all of this is blank, so it sees as, okay, override all the existing data in there with blanks. So if I just wanted to upload gender for these particular gentlemen, I can do this, just the three separate variables. Go back, upload it again, and I will say only those 3 variables, saying, okay, for these one, you're only going to change the gender on record 1. That's how you do it. So that's kind of a useful little feature. You can basically upload partial information without touching the other information in there. So once you created a report, and I'll tell you how to create a report in a little bit, and you want to export that outside of REDCap, you're going to see this screen. So basically what it's going to ask you is like, okay, which export format are you going to want? The difference between raw data and labels is that raw data is those that raw data value that you defined in your data dictionary, for instance, 1s and 0s. really useful if you, for instance, want to calculate with it or do some analysis on it. The labels, on the other hand, are a little bit more human readable, because instead of a 1 and a 0, it will give male and female, or option 1, 2, and 3. So there's a difference there. So export what you want. For SPSS, SAS, R, and Stata, it will give you a number of files that you all need. It will also give you an instruction on how to upload it to the respective program. On the right-hand side of this, after you selected this, you also have de-identification options. Specifically, you can remove all known identifiers, you can hash the record ID field, remove all free text if you want that. But also, and I really think this is cool, is the date shifting functionality. So if there are dates in your project and you want to basically de-identify them but still have the context between them intact, for instance, if you have somebody's date of birth and somebody's date of when they had a heart attack, it's kind of handy to know exactly how much time is between the two. So instead of hashing them at random, all of them, it actually adds a random number between 0 and 364 to each date field in your project. So all the dates will be shifted with a random number. So this maintains the context between all the dates, while at the same time de-identifying in it. Because if you even are off by 2 or 3 days for anybody's date of birth, it's really hard to identify that person. If it's the exact date of birth, a lot easier. However, a couple days off, it becomes a whole lot difficult. So that's how you can do that. REDCap won't actually tell you what the number is that it date shifts with. To figure that one out, you would need to do a clean data export without de-identifying and then subtracting 2 dates from each other. There's also an option to export a data access group for each record, or export the survey identifier field and the timestamp. Not everybody wants that. However, it's handy to have if you want to look at completion times, for instance. So before you can export anything, you have to create a report. So first step is the report creation. You're going to name your report. So give it my report, or mails only report, whatever you want to call it. Second step is defining access. Who has access to this report? Only me, or everybody in this project, or only a certain subset of people, or a certain data access group. Most of it's standardly set up for everybody has access. However, if you do want to limit it to certain people, that's where you can do that. Third step is selecting fields. So these are the fields you want to be included in your export. You can select individual fields or add entire forms on the go. After you've done that, you probably want to set up some filters. For instance, give me only the people that are left-handed, or give me all the males that are left-handed and have diabetes and are between the ages of 30 and 64. You can do that with filters, kind of handy. And then finally, ordering the results. Some people, it's automatically ordered to start out with on study ID or record ID, the very first one. However, if you want to order it, for instance, by date of birth or last name, you can do that. And then, of course, viewing your results after you created the report, and then finally exporting it. So, how to do that? In any REDCap project, you go to Data Exports, Reports, and Stats. It will show you a list of all the reports that are been in there. By default, each and every project in REDCap will have all data and selected instruments and or events for all records. So A and B will always be in there. However, I created a couple of different ones. For instance, this one only displays people that have the last name Obama, or this one is only all males or all females. You can view any report by clicking on View Report. In this case, no results were found. Only the males. Only the males. There we go. Get a nice little overview of only the males. There's also a stats button where you can click on. It gives you very basic graphs, bar charts. You can make it a pie chart if you want. Get a nice pie chart. Up to you what you want to do. I would only use this for very quick, I need to have a quick picture for whatever presentation I'm going to, and I don't have time to load it into my statistical program of choice and build a pretty one. However, so it's a good way to get an overview, but not necessary for most people. However, let's say we want to create a new report. Click on Create a New Report, and that will take us to create a new report. So first thing, give it a name. So let's give it Training December. Step 1 is user access. All users can access this, or I can say, okay, I will only give these 3 people access, or only selected user roles, or only selected data access groups, or a combination of all of them. So only these 3 people, these user roles, and these data access groups. So you can mess that up with that. So view a user list will actually give you a list of all the people that can access it based on the selections you just made. Kind of handy. So, but for now, let's choose all users. And then we get to pick a field. So it always starts with study ID because it assumes you like study IDs. However, there's also a big drop-down list with all the variables in the project at this point in time. So if, for instance, I only want height, I can do that. If that's annoying to you, adding all the variables one by one, you can also click on an instrument, give me all the demographics. It will then add them out automatically by just selecting that. If I say like, yeah, but I don't want emails and I don't want the gender and the pregnant question, you can just delete them by the X, a little X button. There's also a way you can, if you have more than a couple dozen variables, click on the AB button and just type in a name, for instance, let's say fries, and even a partial will lead you a list of all the variables that have that in there, or gender, G, and click on that and you can select that field. So that's kind of handy to quickly build a report for that. Again, you can include those data access groups or survey identifiers if you want. So let's not do that for now because we don't have those. And then you set up some filters. So for instance, for the study ID, I want all of them to does not contain invalid, for instance. So you can do that. I can actually craft a bunch of different filters with ands and ors, or I can use advanced logic to actually convert this into something that REDCap can read, and I can edit myself. Similar to branching logic, it's all based on the same syntax. So I can say like, n gender is 1, for instance. You can do that. So that's a thing that you can do. Let's not put a filter because I want to have everybody. But you can use filters to craft fairly complex reports, especially if you have a large amount of records. You can have filters by event, by data access groups. Just selecting them would do that. So yeah. So there you go. Finally, ordering. So let's say you want not study ID, but by last name first. You can have an extra one, like if they have the same last name, order it by study ID. So up to 3. I hit Save Report, and then say, okay, do you want to view it? Sure. Hit View Report, and it will give me an overview of all the people in there. It will actually give me 1 row per event record combination, in this sense, in the same order, the same middle names, etc. If there's no data in there, it's blank. Otherwise, you will see this. Does that make sense? You can export that directly into this little thing we saw. Let's say I want to export it as a raw Excel file. I want to de-identify the lot of it. Let's do remove all dates, date shift, and then hit export data. I'll actually give you an overview of what to do, how to open this in this particular program. Click on this and it will download. That easy. Exporting, we just had that. There are some extra things you can export. For instance, you can export everything in one ginormous big PDF. All the records, all the events, all the forms, ginormous PDF. Yeah, some people like that because they want a hard copy of all their records. There's also an ability to create a zip file of all the files that have been uploaded. For instance, if you have a dermatology project where everybody uploads a couple of gross pictures of their skin, you want all those pictures all at once, you can hit the zip file and you get all the pictures at once instead of having to download them one by one, which is kind of handy. You can also create PDFs of individual records. So specifically, you can have a single form that's blank or a single form with all the data filled out, or for a specific record, all the blank forms or all the forms with data. This is especially handy if you, for instance, have people that are not as computer savvy or prefer paper forms over electronic forms. So you just print it out, mail it to them via snail mail, and then get it back and fill it in. REDCap will actually generate these PDFs based on the current state of your project. So if you make any changes to it, you don't need to go back to your original Word document or your case report form to get the latest and greatest version. So that's kind of handy. If you do that, the PDF and other export options is over here. Big zip file, click on zip to download. Big PDF file, click on PDF to download. It will give you the PDF. And that's just a lot of forms. This is actually fairly small, only 14, because I don't have that many variables in there. However, if you have 100 people in there, it becomes quite long quickly. If you want to do that individual thing, you just go to that specific person's record ID. So let's go to Mr. Putin. Let's say I want to print out the demographics form. Up here, there's download PDF of this instrument with all those options. If I do a blank one, only this survey, I get a nice form, entirely blank with everything filled in there. So easy enough, right? Some advanced exporting, you can use the application programming interface or API to export and import automatically. You can export individual records automatically by virtue of their unique export ID. If you're in data exports, there's an ID behind each of the custom generated reports. So for a digit number, reference that in your API call and you get that specific subset of the data. So really handy, so you don't have to program that in to clean the data after it gets slurped into your system. Especially handy if you're using APIs. You can use data entry triggers for the import and export, meaning that if you want to basically pull the new data as it becomes available, instead of having to check every 5 minutes, you can actually tell REDCap every single time somebody saves something or submits a survey in this particular project, ping this specific URL on a website somewhere, and that can then trigger your API call to download the latest and greatest data. So that's a way you can do that. So we use this, for instance, in the REDCap Amalga bridge to import medical data from the EMR or to export data back into Amalga to run some more tailored reports with some calculations in it. And of course, whatever system you want to hook up to this, as long as you have the API call, you can mess with it. So that was my spiel, nice and quick. Introduction is next month or next year, and the advanced classes are on the schedule, and these are the advanced classes. Thanks for coming, and I hope to see you in one of the next classes.